Welcome to the Sheckler Spotlight, where creativity meets purpose and conversation goes deeper. Join host Harrison Sheckler as he sits down with inspiring guests from all walks of life, artists, thinkers, musicians, and everyday heroes, to explore the stories that shape us, uplift us, and connect us. Now here's your host, Harrison Sheckler.
Hi, I'm your host, Harrison Sheckler. My guest today is acclaimed actress, singer, author, and Grammy-nominated performer, Alexandra Silber. Raised in Michigan and trained at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, Alexandra launched her career in London's West End at just 21 years old, quickly establishing herself as one of the most compelling performers of her generation. She has since appeared on Broadway in Fiddler on the Roof, performed at Carnegie Hall, and earned a Grammy nomination for her portrayal of Maria in West Side Story with the San Francisco Symphony. Beyond the stage, Alexandra is also an accomplished writer, with her memoir, White Hot Grief Parade, and novel After Anatevka earning widespread praise. Today, we'll explore her extraordinary journey through theater, music, storytelling, and the experiences that have shaped her life and career. The spotlight is now on you. Alexandra Silber, welcome to the podcast.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. I was blushing hearing that intro. It's so funny to sometimes hear it because I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm sitting on my sofa and I'm like, what have I done? And then you hear it and you're like, oh, I've done okay.
Yeah, I know sometimes we have to recap and be like, we put in a lot of hard work and it's okay to be rewarded for those, those small victories along the way. And that's why I'm so excited.
Reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to visit with you and just kind of learn how you got to this point in your career and your life. So I'd like to set the stage.
Okay.
What was your childhood like? And how did it eventually lead you onto this path of storytelling? What were those first influences?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I love that you've put it through that lens, that through storytelling. Being really candid, I now look back on my childhood and recognize that there were some quite serious hardships going on. Even though I felt and experienced a lot of love and a lot of certainty and support from both of my parents. Growing up in Michigan, just outside Detroit, I think the really defining event of my childhood was that my father was sick. My father was diagnosed with cancer when I was 9, and already a very sensitive child that probably needed a lot of extra support and guidance with how to sort of respond to a world that I had a lot of intense responses to, highly sensitive, just needed guidance. My parents were so loving and so supported, but legitimately distracted by fighting cancer. And there were these periods where my dad would be fine, he'd be in remission, the cancer would come back. And I think, it's funny, I sort of, every once in a while I go, why do I have generalized anxiety? And then you're like, oh, maybe it's that. I do think that there was to answer your question, I think there was this always sense of unnameable foreboding, this sword of Damocles over my family, that especially now as an adult, I kind of acknowledge in my parents that they were, that's that wonderful moment when you grow up and you're like, oh, all adults are making it up as they go.
Yes.
There's no a guidebook or handbook for the recently grown. I think in my head, I always sort of assumed that you turn 25 and a giant binder arrives at your door that tells you how to rent cars and process trauma. But anyway, it's kind of like in Beetlejuice when they get the guidebook for the recently deceased. Yes. I was like, where's that for growing up? But anyway,
you could write this next book,
I could write that. You know what I should write that. But I think that what I realize now is that I was left with some really big emotions about the nature of the universe and the nature of life and death and the nature of love and facing adversity. These really big questions, right? And the way that I coped with that was through art, predominantly through reading. And reading was, and storytelling and the power of storytelling was such an effective and beautiful way for me to, at a very young age, be in dialogue with these concepts and questions and ideas that I couldn't be in dialogue with my 10-year-old peers, right?
Mm.
You know, I wasn't going to, you know, go over to a slumber party and be like, any of you all ever think about your parents dying? You know, like it would
Right.
have been a
Yeah.
bit of a downer. And but I could actually have those conversations with John Steinbeck and Tolstoy and Thornton Wilder, and I felt like I was in dialogue with these great works of art and felt really shaped, and that I almost had personal relationships with their creators, which I've come to know is actually a very common thing with people that work on work, especially of um, artists that we've lost, like Mozart and Handel, and, you know, all of that. But for me, also theater specifically was readings opposite, in the sense that I intellectually and spiritually had a lot of questions, but I also was filled with so much powerful emotion that didn't have anywhere responsible to go. Um, and theater was a place where I could take those emotions and offer them to the art form. And what's so interesting is it's an art form where that level of emotional vulnerability is not only allowed and I guess sort of accepted, it's actually necessary to execute the task of telling the story at all.
Mm.
And it's a very strange contract that sort of happens in that rehearsal space, because that level of emotion and exposure and vulnerability is acceptable and welcome in that rehearsal, in those walls, but you couldn't necessarily behave that way like at the bank, right? Or
Right.
at school. It's kind of this strange silent contract we have. But regardless, those two forms of storytelling really shaped who I became and how I processed the world. And I guess looking back on it, I go, it's no wonder that embodied storytelling as an actor and the written word of storytelling as an author ultimately became who I professionally was, and of course was via identity. And then, you know, something where you and I cross over is then, of course, there was the element of music,
Mm-hmm.
which felt like, and another area where we cross over, it felt like it was the only way beyond language to sort of touch divinity, to
Mm.
touch the unspeakable, to touch the unutterable, something that can only be felt. And it's so physical, and it's so, there's something about the wordlessness that touches the unnameable in the divine that felt also very comforting to me, because there were things that could not be embodied on stage, and there were words that those authors could not provide that had to exist in that surrender. And I think faith in music filled that in over time, especially. So no, that's kind of a long answer, but I guess the magical thing about things like that is I always think, and I wonder if you agree with this, you know, every artist, I suppose not every artist, I suppose it's everyone on some level, but particularly artists, they always have a why. They always have a, not what I do or how I do it or what my dreams are, which is very forward, present and forward focused. It's very
Mm-hmm.
future focused conversation. But the why do you do this is a very past focused conversation. And it's usually rooted in extremely personal origin stories. And I'm very fascinated by people's why, because it always feels like the present is in dialogue with that. And, you know, not to be bogged down by it, but I think for me, there's always a little 9-year-old girl that is with me as I continue to create and move forward in the world, I guess.
So if we could dial in on that, what
Yeah.
what would you say your why is, examining in this present moment?
Mm-hmm. You know, Rilke talks about not answering questions, but living the questions. And I feel very moved by this concept of we're not always seeking just to know. We're seeking the exercise of asking, the
I like that.
the extraordinary nature of permanent voracious curiosity is like why we're on earth, you know? And I think for me, I was a child that had very specific needs when it came to those questions, and they were very emotional and in some ways quite tragic and
Mm-hmm.
premature. But I felt, because of art, armed to face them
Mm.
and armed to live those questions. And I think now in the present day, I view my artistry, and I include teaching in that. I view my artistry as service. I wish to be in and of service to humanity itself. We have always looked to artists in society as people that go beyond philosophical moralizing or religious preaching. We go to art for embodied experiential wisdom, that by witnessing stories, by hearing stories, by putting ourselves in stories and having a real cathartic experience, it's like it completes that triangle somehow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by facilitating that and participating in that as best I can, it feels like I'm participating in not only an artistic but a human legacy. And if a story I tell can illuminate one person, make one person feel less alone, it feels worth it. And I just feel like I'm doing it for that very girl who needed words and stories and music and acting back then, because she's out there. And however old she may be, do you know what I mean? I just
I do.
I do think it feels like um, empathy in practice, I guess.
When did you start to realize or establish this mindset? Was it something that you're realizing now as you look back? Or,
Hmm.
like, yeah, when was that time that you would define it the way you're defining it now? I'm curious.
That's a great question. So my first couple of jobs, the all of the shows that I did in London in the West End
Mm-hmm.
were long runs of musicals. I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
when I say long runs, I mean like long runs of musicals. There is no training that could ever prepare a person for what it's like to do something over 500 times in a row every day.
You
Right?
just have to experience it, right?
You just have to experience it. And it's like, I sometimes say to civilians, I'll be like,
Civilian.
okay, now, civilians, I go, okay, like, I know that you've been a doctor your whole life, or you've been an accountant or a lawyer, and you have done the same thing for 30 years. But like, you didn't wear the same outfit, talk to the same people, using the same words, having the same emotional arc every day, sometimes twice a day. It's just such a different exercise. And if you go to this place of surrender, if you go to sort of like, I think the way the Zen would talk about just practice, right? The practice of living. The thing that is beautiful about that is, and it's ritualistic too. I think the thing that is beautiful about it is the show. This is what I learned. The show never changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you change, and the world changes, and the audience changes. And you can measure your existence and the existence of being alive by how you and the show are in relationship to one another. And that is how it can remain alive every performance. But of course, like, I was, as you quoted, I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't remotely done sort of, cooking as a grown up. And the thing that I think I realized is there are a lot of things that you start to kind of come online to. For example, like, oh, as an artist, it feels really good to be inspired, right? Like inspiration feels so good, And I even think Wayne Dyer, I believe, is the person that said that inspiration is like, if you break the word down, it's in the presence of spirit, right? Like it feels otherworldly, which I love. But of course, how long are you going to be totally blown away by your level of inspiration by performance 300, right? And I think what I started to learn was, one, my experience of inspiration was not the show's responsibility or the role's responsibility to deliver to me. This wasn't about me, right? As time went on, I started to realize, one, my creative spark is my responsibility. And if I'm not getting it from the show, I have to look elsewhere to seek it, because this show, this character, this audience that has sacrificed so much time, travel, money to be there in the fifth row, that does not care that I might be bored, deserves my best. I am in service to them. And so everything I can do to be my best, and we're not just talking about like, make sure you sleep and drink water and are vocally warmed up and are focused. And it's also about really wanting to be there and remembering the technique of, even though I, Alexandra, have done this 500 times, Laura Fairley, Julie Jordan, Huddle have never done it. And every time we begin the exercise again, there's a tabula rasa, and that's my job. And the way that I started to really think about it, especially as it became more of this like quite spiritual exercise, was I'm in service to the audience that I said made all these sacrifices. I'm in service to my scene partners who deserve my full attention and my full technique. I'm in service to the creators of this, whether they are with us or not. I'm in service to the director and his vision, their vision. But I'm also ultimately in service to somebody that you might find surprising. I'm in supreme service to a person who cannot speak or breathe or live today without my spirit and voice and heart and soul filling them. And that's this character. This character has no life if I don't show up in every way that means. And that's a service job. And so by that time, I started to really realize that actually, yes, of course, it's about me, but it's not about my ego, right? It's about how can I be of service? And the second that I really started to feel that, which definitely was, particularly by the time I was doing Carousel, which was my third sort of exercise of that, it just changed my experience, because I was no longer experiencing disappointment or boredom or sometimes people can be a little petulant and act out, but they're working through stuff. They're growing up, and we all experience like, oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. But I always felt like I responded it by refocusing. And then, also it's so nice to be able to talk to somebody with a faith lens too, because of course, if you think about it, like, this is all sacred ritual, right? I define ritual by the carving out of time, by declaring that this moment is sacred and this other moment before and after it are ordinary. And there's nothing wrong with ordinary, right?
No.
But when we begin a prayer, when I light candles on Tuesday, those are candles lit on Tuesday. When I light them on Friday, I'm participating in, just like theater, the same words, the same gestures, the same blocking, the same everything. And it's not just about me, and it's not just about now. It's about 5,000 years and participating in the chain of 5,000 years of people continuing to do it after me. Every time you utter a prayer, you're participating in this ritualistic moment. And there's something about theater that feels very aligned with that to me. And so, yeah, it's, I don't know, there's something about it that just feels like it all comes together. But with the service lens, which I've had, I think, since my 20s, I just think it's humbled me to think that my talent and my expression isn't exclusively about my experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how it can be of service to the greater good. You know what I mean?
I do. I'm curious and I find it fascinating, someone in your field who is able to pair their spirituality with their service and just essentially how they navigate life,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in the arts specifically, because I feel there's just a lot of different backgrounds of people in the arts, and
Yeah,
faith isn't always the forefront for them, just
totally.
how they grew up in their life.
Yeah.
With you, would you say, maybe this isn't fair to ask or the right direction, but would you say that the arts have informed your spirituality and your faith, or would you say
Mm-hmm.
your faith and the way you approach is the way or dictates the way you approach your art? Does that make sense?
Totally. No one's ever asked me that before. That just blew my mind. My instinct is to say that initially, I think the art itself was my first experience really of something that felt divine, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something about, especially theater, that feels so team sport like,
Yeah, yeah.
that I suppose through the lens of I guess what I'd call like religious practice, even like beyond just spirituality and faith itself, is like we enter this building and we come together for a higher purpose. And like, many times where the similarity ends.
Right.
But there is this like, I have to say, slight detour, but I
Mm-hmm.
have to say, I find that at its absolute best, one of the things that faith can provide for the human experience is, and regardless of the denomination or the paradigm, there is something that it facilitates about the human's willingness and capacity to fully surrender to the unknown,
Mm.
and to do so with more peace in their heart. And obviously, when you change the denominations and the practices, like the reasons and the stories and the data behind it might alter. But for me, surrender, I know we're on a podcast sort of radio, so I'll describe it slightly, but when I think about like a physical manifestation of surrender, it feels very much like eyes closed, head upward, palms open, chest open, like a lot of exposure. It feels like a very open physical gesture that's also very vulnerable. The equivalent of an animal showing their belly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And done with an element of peace, that really is surrender. It's like, well, what will be, and I am open to what will happen next, and, insert the why, if you will. And I think as human beings, we're meaning making creatures, and a lot of misery comes from wanting to control things. And so this facility to surrender, I do think helps with the richness of life. But sometimes I think people confuse surrender with, I put this in quotes, giving up, that it somehow is a capitulation to life's circumstances. And to me, though, giving up is like the opposite gesture. It feels folded on oneself, fetal position like. And, sometimes actions don't always, it could look very similar. Somebody leaves a city, like I'm leaving New York. For some, that might be, I'm giving up on my dreams. I'm never going to be involved in art again. I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And I'm closing up all of my heart and soul to this. But you're still getting on a plane and going somewhere else. But another person who's getting on a plane and leaving New York might go, I really tried. I realized I'm happier surrounded by mountains and trees and smaller communities where I can feel like I can make a bigger impact. And I'm so glad I did that, but time for the next chapter. Like, two people are getting on a plane, but one is giving up and one is surrender. And I think sometimes we confuse those things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm getting so far away from your question. Okay, I'm back. Which is that I do think that my art informed my spirituality. And I guess I'll say this too. I grew up in actually really quite a secular family for reasons that were not entirely chosen.
Mm.
I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to sort of say, you know, some of these aren't my stories to tell, but I'll just lightly mention parts that are. I had a very difficult, my whole family had a very difficult relationship with my grandparents, my father's parents, who were Jewish
Mm.
and of a completely different generation that, you know, filled with traumatic inheritances that I will never embody or understand. But they took great issue with the fact that my mom was not Jewish and that I was therefore, in their mind, illegitimately not Jewish.
Mm.
And I felt that Judaism was kept from me. And of course, for a lot of my life, those were the Jews that were closest to me. And it felt like I was looking inside a beautiful house, banging on the window, and no one would let me in.
Mm.
And it was very painful because there was so much beauty and that I wanted to be a part of, but I didn't have a bat mitzvah. I felt very disconnected from that, despite having this deep longing to be connected, and a lot of language around me. A lot of what I think is really troubling and not productive language that grandparents should not be offering their grandchildren, right? So I think for me, there was always this huge yearning, and obviously on some level, a cultural and you know, a DNA inheritance of wanting to belong. But what's beautiful for me, I feel, is that as I grew up, and especially as I worked on a lot of Jewish projects where I was welcomed into the community of that caste, into the, and particularly when I did Fiddler in London, where there are significantly fewer Jews,
Sure.
especially that are not modern Orthodox Jews. I found myself in this wonderful position of going, oh, I know so much more about this than I thought I did, you know, and oh my gosh, I'm one of the only young Jews that these people might ever meet. And I want to be a good ambassador and I want to make sure I know the answers to questions. And I will say that like the participation in that particularly made me go, I really want this. I want to belong. And maybe being Jewish enough is a gift I have to offer myself, right?
Mm.
Because my relationship to that divinity and my certainty of that divinity is unwavering and has always been unwavering, even in moments of adversity, if not especially in moments of adversity. And I remember very clearly that when, at an incredibly powerful experience, the day my father died, actually, it's funny, I
Mm.
sometimes think this incredibly important rabbi, I met him on the worst day of my life. My father had died that morning. Keep in mind, I'm 18 years old. And it suddenly became very important to my grandparents that my father had his service in a synagogue. Fine. But it was a little bit like, I guess we have to find a synagogue and a rabbi to the list because they had been very incentivized to assimilate, which many people were.
Mm-hmm.
And this wonderful man, Rabbi Daniel Syme, walks into my house, and I knew that for lack of a better word, like he'd been sent by God to take care of me. And the long and the short of that story was my grandparents were very against me participating in my dad's funeral service and memorial service because, of course, I wasn't legitimate to stand up there in that space to them. And they said some pretty cruel things. But this rabbi, I couldn't help it. I almost felt like this Greek, like Electra, like, this like huge, monstrous energy of telling passionate story after passionate story about my father's character and quality and beauty and innocence and sweetness. And Rabbi Syme said, I don't know you, but I don't know if any of you have a relationship with God, but I like to think that I do. And I think we have a pretty talkative relationship. And right now he's giving me a huge sign that this girl is supposed to give the eulogy. And so I'm going to go with
Whoa.
God on this.
Wow.
It was very controversial, but I did it. And I think he changed my life because there were all these, not only did that service happen and something so powerful, tsunami-like wave of shifting of grief happened in that moment because of that. The act of delivering a eulogy is just so profound and moves a person's grief forward so specifically. But I spoke to him a couple of times after, just feeling really lost, and I guess I remember feeling like Rabbi Syme could see that I had all of this longing, and he just pointed the boat in the direction, and my own wind and life moved in the sails of the direction he pointed it in. And I'm thrilled to say that I'm still in touch with him. And he's a character actually in both of my books. He's in my memoir, of course, because he was literally there. But in After Anatevka, I modeled a lot of Perchik after my father. And I wanted Perchik to have a teacher that really believed in him and fought for him. And I was like, I'm going to name that yeshiva teacher Rabbi Syme, and just, as like a little nod to him. And I guess what happened is I'd lost touch with Rabbi Syme, and somebody was walking through his temple and go, Rabbi Syme, you won't believe this. I just picked up this book and you're in it. Rabbi Daniel Syme, you're a character in this book. And he's like, what is it? What is it? And they brought it, and like my author picture was in the back, right? And he goes, I know her. So he tracked me down and he found me, and it was such an unbelievable, powerful reunion. And when I went to Detroit to do the book talk there, he made no announcement. He just showed up in the signing line, and there he was. And it was so special. And I feel like I owe so very much to him. And to, it's interesting, like at your question about did the art inform the spirituality or the other way around? I think just, in conclusion, I think initially the art did inform the spirituality, but then the spirituality was able to inform the art, and then the art feeding the spirituality. And it now feels like a really life-giving circle that's never ending. And it's an honor too that, I suppose the end of that little coda about my upbringing is, in adulthood, I was able to reclaim something that I always felt did belong to me, but so many voices said it did not. And so I was able to go through all of the rituals that make it official on paper, if you will. But all that felt like was a return to something that had always felt right. So it feels, I don't know how my grandparents would feel about it now, but, I think part of their dismissal of me is part of why I'm here with such strength in my heart. And that's okay. That was their journey. And this is mine.
I think that's beautiful. Absolutely
Thank you.
beautiful. So it sounds like at 18, this experience with the rabbi, that's kind of gave you, from what I'm gathering, like the permission to really embrace being Jewish and Judaism and the practices. And then over the years, you pursued that faith more and dove into it What are some of the I mean, I know that you had you finally had a bat
I
mitzvah.
did. I
Yeah,
did.
and so you had that moment. You've also, like you said, you were in Fiddler on the Roof, and so you have these little moments where you can explore the faith more that you haven't had a chance to pursue. I'm curious, can you tell us about your bat mitzvah and what that has
Yeah.
meant for you and that experience?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So the number 18 is a very lucky number in Judaism. It, Judaism has a lot of numerology and lots of,
Hmm.
the deeper you go in, all these things. 18, the Hebrew alphabet, each letter is associated with a number, and the number 18 is associated with the word chai, which means life, right? So oftentimes, um, when people make donations, they're in numerals of 18 so that there's, some
Ah,
good fortune attached to it, right? So for me, the fact that this hugely tragic, life-altering event happened at 18 has always felt significant, and meeting Rabbi Simon at 18 has felt significant. And I was coming down the barrel of turning 36, and I was like, like that would feel like an auspicious time to have the bat mitzvah I never got to have,
right.
um, for a number of reasons. And I just decided to really go for it. And I wanted to really do it in a way that felt personal, in a way that felt good, in a way that didn't feel too grouchy or strict, that felt like everything it should be, which is a welcoming into community and an announcement of a declaration of arrival. And what I did was, I was so fortunate to, another wonderful rabbi in my life was Rabbi Larry Hoffman, who for many, many years worked at Hebrew Union College in the Reform movement as this unbelievable leader and thinker and author and philosopher. And strangely enough, a fellow student of Rabbi Daniel Syme. They knew each other from college, and you just go, oh, the world. So Rabbi Larry Hoffman, though, based in New York, and he was our consultant on the Broadway production of Fiddler.
Hmm.
He helped us design the rituals. So he helped us sort of stage and design the Sabbath prayer scene and then the wedding ceremony. And because I was, I'll just say, I, as an actor, because I was playing Seidel, the bride,
Right.
and I was also in the family scene where Sabbath prayer was staged, I just spent a lot more time than the rest of our cast with Rabbi Hoffman. And he, again, he was another one that was like, hmm, you have question, you have a certainty of God. Like, he was very like, he just found me out. And we just realized that we really wanted to stay in conversation with one another in ways that neither of us fully understood. He invited me to be part of, every couple of years he had a retreat with his fourth year rabbinical and cantorial students where they go away and they do deep thinking. And it's actually really wonderful. You would love this too. The theme of this retreat was any way in, right? So
Ah,
obviously they'd been spending all of this time with liturgy and Hebrew and this and that and all of these things that were very traditional. But the theme of this retreat in their penultimate year, their fourth year, was, what if you can offer people this kind of divine inspiration through music, through theater, through dance, through nature? Like, so it's this entire explorations of ways that you can find ways toward divinity through potentially alternative paths. And I think, just knowing a little of what I know of you, I think you would have exploded with joy. And I sort of came in as the theatrical educator that offered people this
uh-huh.
opportunity to have this really inspired experience through theater, and was in dialogue with these students. And it was so, so special. And there was this one student named Samantha, again, that I was like, I don't know, like, we have to be friends. You're just so cool and so smart and da da. And long story short, when I had this experience, we had stayed in touch. I reached out to her and I was like, I would love to work with you on this. I know you're busy and you're this and you're that and you're blah, blah, but I would love to take private lessons with you about this. And also, I think be in a private discussion about how some of these conversations were quite painful, bringing up a lot of childhood memories that needed to be worked through in order for this to be fully owned.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the really powerful experiences that happens sometimes with like a really official conversion, which I don't suppose I needed to do, but Rabbi Samantha Frank is her name. She was like, I think a mikvah would be a really powerful experience for you. It's where you do a full submersion in ritualistic water, and it's done for a myriad of reasons across the Jewish faith. And there's a parallel to baptism, I suppose, but it's a little bit more available to people whenever a new start is desired. So it's something that you do, bride and groom do before they're married.
Oh, okay.
Or before, if you're going through a huge transition, let's say there's a divorce that's happening, or you're done with cancer treatment. Sometimes Jews will go to the mikveh to be like, this is a new chapter. It's very powerful. And it's something about the election of it that feels really special.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to do it because she was like, I just think for you, let's rinse off all of those words, all of that judgment, all of that doubt that you might have inherited from your grandparents. And when you enter, it's not just for you, it's about, you don't need to carry those words around anymore. And sometimes ritual is very powerful. And so that experience was so incredible. And I'll tell you, I had more people at that. I mean, when I say I had a lot of people, there were 10 people there, but I had more people there than at my wedding because I eloped. And
Mm-hmm.
I was married by Rabbi Samantha Frank. But it was I was probably the most significant adult ceremony of my life. Part of it is other people bearing witness to it as a declaration. But it was my closest friends that also came from a lot of different faith backgrounds, or who knew how important this was to me. And when you have a bar bat mitzvah, you have to read from the Torah, and you sometimes you don't choose it. It's often aligned with your birthday, but because I was doing a choose your own adventure, I was like, I want the musical theater passage. So of course I chose Jacob interprets Pharaoh's dreams.
Oh.
And I was like, because musical theater, right?
Yeah, of course.
So of course, and which was wonderful and fun. And I, was able to really learn the trope and really learn Hebrew. And I read a really significant chunk, like way more than you have to in order for it to be legitimate. And it took me about a year and change, and it just felt so special. And additionally, like that thing when it reminded me a little bit of when you did the 100 days of practicing.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I loved that. I loved watching you do that because there's something about learning, not necessarily new things in your experience, but like refining and learning new things in your adulthood after the constant flow of information reception from school comes to its end.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the engagement with that and the expansion of your mind, in your case, your fingers, your memory, like all sorts of things. There was something about that was so pleasurable and made me feel so expansive. And anyway, all of which is to say it was so sweet. And my mom and my husband, their faces as I was like finishing up the Torah portion, they had like I'm watching it right now because the Winter Olympics are on. They totally looked like Olympic parents. You know what I mean? They were like, mouthing it along with me and just go. It was so sweet. And yeah, it was. I think sometimes we have to give ourselves these gifts. We have to. It's one of the rituals I've engaged with in my life that wasn't a play.
Mm.
And I just felt so connected to the any and all. And, pleased to say that I made a lifelong friend in Samantha and her husband. I I know it inspired one of the attendees of that event to have her own experience. And who knew that claiming your authentic self and accepting my authentic self could also be part of the practice of service and community.
Mm.
It was powerful.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Oh,
That's
thank you for asking.
yeah, of
Thank you for
course.
asking.
Are there people in the arts and in your field that have this similar trajectory or mindset? Because you're like the first person that I've met that's really like it's an identity thing for you, where
Mm,
like like you said, how the arts are informing your faith and vice versa now.
yeah,
Have
yeah.
you noticed that with anyone else, or has this really just been a self journey?
I do know some people, um, but I think for a lot of people, they experience it with some stigma,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and misunderstanding. Um, I think a lot of that is informed by the culture we currently live in, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very, there's like a lot of assumptions about what those things might mean, and maybe just like one adult conversation might dispel that, but
Really, right.
I don't, right? I don't think we necessarily live in that climate. And there's a lot of tragic things about that. I think that I will say this. I know about myself that I am not the kind of person, I was about to say activist, but that doesn't feel accurate. So, eh, activist adjacent, I'll just say, right?
Sure.
That that feels that um, really harsh energy of attack, energy of kind of like pumping my fist in the air and shouting it's not my style, right? And I think that they say in the activism universe that like you have to find the way that you can contribute that feels sustainable and good for you. And for me, I feel like shining a light on information, little known facts, beauties, and joys is my way of contributing to dispelling fear, creating understanding, creating bridges of connection, creating, oh, I didn't know that. That's a lot like that leads to those cool conversations. And I have noticed that the net has been positive to that than
Mm-hmm.
than the negative, right? It's not for everyone, but that's okay. And I have to say, I also like really enjoy, like I have a lot of like Jewish holiday education videos that have a real like positive, let's play dreidel, like kind of a vibe, right?
Right, right.
Um, and I think that I hope that they're a source of illumination and connection. For me, it's always about light, 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 education, education, inspiration, curiosity, and that is the way that I find it the most accessible to connect and share. And so I'm going to play to my strengths. And I spent so much of my life in that spiritual part of my heart feeling shame and embarrassment and not enoughness, that enacting it in a way that feels authentic feels like it also heals me. And it maybe it'll heal someone else, but that's not exclusively why I do. It might just, I've had so many fellow Jews go, I had no idea about this holiday, or that's why we do that, or whatever, and things that are really, really fun and beautiful. And for me, it's just an exercise in meaning making. And ultimately, I don't know that you do, but I sense, and maybe you can answer, that I just think we all have a lot more in common than we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And by sharing the specificities, we offer each other the open palmed opportunity to have hands taken up. And that's I think how I can serve. And to do it without embarrassment or shame is a really important part of me being who I fully am. So if it's not for you, you are welcome to unsubscribe.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. It's really that
And
simple.
yeah, it's really that simple. But it's been wonderful because, I'll even say, like, I wouldn't be able to know whether I found you / maybe you found me. I have no idea who found who first, but I wouldn't know whether it's through music or through having cool comment exchanges about faith. I don't actually remember. I wouldn't be able to tell you. I just know, like, oh, that really cool guy seems to be moving through the world the way I do. And that's nice. We would never have met.
No, I'm glad you said that because that means a lot. And
You know?
sometimes I need to hear. Well, and I think I don't remember how we first connected, but I following you throughout the years, I feel like we're on the same wavelength, or
Yeah,
like the same
totally. I do too.
trajectory.
Yeah.
And I come from a very I grew up. Well, I am Catholic. I have a Christian background, but one thing that was really interesting. When I was in Tucson finishing my doctorate, I played a year. I was the pianist at a Jewish synagogue. Okay, yeah, and so
Good music.
it opened a whole new world to me, and I was like, this is really fun, cool, and it informed me about the music, and then it actually helped me inform my own faith, and then understand
Totally.
where certain traditions that we have in my faith came from, originated,
Totally.
right? And
Totally.
again, to your point of there's so much more we have in common with everyone than that really separates us. And if you really I always try to like step back and like think of myself like looking down at the world and our situation, and that we're just this little blue dot in this vast universe, right? Just like
Totally.
think, wow, we're all living in the same small vicinity. We have to work together, and the trivial things that we like get so caught up in, it doesn't really matter that
No.
much. So it's like, why are you, when you could embrace, like reframe your perspective to say other people have different upbringings, they are the way they are because of certain circumstances, but we can see, what am I trying to say? That it's better to choose a framing of like peace and love and just understanding, but still you can still have your convictions. I don't know
Totally.
how I'm not defining this
You're
that well, but
No, first of all, you're doing great.
okay.
Second of all, my husband has this concept that he discusses sometimes when he discusses just the nature of current political conflict.
Sure,
And
yeah.
I find my husband is so sage in this way, but he has this framing that I think might illuminate what you're saying.
Yeah,
He
okay.
says there are some people that move through the world in which they are more interested in connection over principle. That they're more interested in connecting, even with people they disagree with, than holding their principles in a really black and white, clean way, right? And then there are other people with no judgment who prioritize their principles over connection. I mean, come on, so good. But he says, look, that I think is right now, that has always on some level been a part of the human dialogue and the human experience. But in moments of profound polarization and misunderstanding, and also just like fire hoses of mis and disinformation coming from every side of, I mean, it doesn't even feel like a spectrum anymore. It feels like just like a globe of fire hoses.
Right.
But that, it's important to sort of know where you sit there, because I just know for myself that I intend to live in my principles, but really what I mean by that is to live in my integrity. But that I will always be living in the posture of connection over principle. If I disagree with somebody, I'm still going to try and find a space where I can connect with them. I don't have to like or hang out with them, but can we have a human connection about something? I will always try to seek that.
Hmm.
And I do also think that in those moments is where we can affect change, or even just the ever so slight opening of a mind to see something differently, which I know is a posture I love to live in. I love saying, oh, wow, I was really wrong about that. Wow. Thank goodness I'm having this conversation, because I wouldn't have
Right,
known that,
right.
or you know what? Isn't it unbelievable? I don't know everything. um, yeah. So I try to live in that position. I try to also like model that humility, so that anyone that meets me can feel safe to do the same, I guess.
Hmm.
But I'm a connection over principle gal. But it doesn't mean that I abandon my principles. It just means that I
Correct.
know where my priority lies. And I know I've always found that framing really helpful, because I think one of the things that's happening is that continuing to love thy neighbor, even if they don't share principles, is now creating permanent fractures
It's sad.
over minutia and details. Of course, that I might be overstating the minutia. These might be very, very important things, but I think what it does is it stops connection, and it stops humanizing the other. And when we stop doing that, we really start to get in trouble, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah, I think you touched on it. It's we're a lot of people are dehumanizing people and not seeing the
Yeah,
dignity and, you know, others
yeah,
and their life and their views. It just we need that constant dialogue. That's the only
totally,
way that we
totally.
make positive change. And yeah, I mean, this is so refreshing. So thank you.
Oh, same,
Yeah, yeah, this is
same.
really refreshing.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
I'm curious about your feeling of when you are in flow with your instrument. Do you feel connected to divinity?
Um, to be honest with you, it's at this point in my life, it's one of the only ways I feel connected to divinity.
Really?
Yeah,
How
it's
so?
through, it's always been, if there's any turmoil in my life, ever since I was little, going to, for me, the piano,
Hmm.
um, has always been that outlet of where I feel like I can truly express what I'm feeling,
Hmm.
where, you know, I might not be able to express it in words. Um, but I guess the action is exuding through music.
Yeah,
And then also with, like you've talked about service, I
yeah.
feel my music, I want it to be a service to others.
Hmm.
Where a lot of people in the arts, they can get very egotistical and it's like, look at me, look at me, look at me.
Hmm.
Oh, this is coming to my why. Okay.
Oh, yes, please,
Yeah.
please, please,
Okay.
please.
Now that I'm actually putting this into words, for me, my big thing is when I leave this world, what did I give back to it? How did I make it, I guess, in simplest terms, a better place?
Yeah.
And for me, how did I serve the divine or the creator in a way that is praising him? Or,
Hmm.
you know, I mean, I don't, I don't pretend to know all the answers. I have my ideas of what this all is, but I know that I've been giving these talents. I believe everything happens for a reason. And
Mm.
so I'm like, am I following on the right trajectory? Am I giving back to the world the way I should? I guess in a way it's like to be selfish, I would like to have like a legacy, you know, of,
Sure, of course.
right, you know, but
Yeah,
I want it to be framed in the manner of he was serving others with the gift God gave him.
I love that.
That's how I
I mean,
define it.
first of all, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Thanks for asking.
I think that it's always about planting trees you'll never sit in the shade of,
Mm-hmm.
right? And knowing that we might not see the end of the work, but it doesn't mean we can desist from it. I'm paraphrasing a beautiful rabbi's trope, which I'll have to mention later. But that though we might not see the end, we must keep going. It's interesting though. Gifts given and gifts utilized and service rendered. The like I said, the wordlessness of music,
Mm-hmm.
the pleasure of skill
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is really something. And but something I would love to talk to you about is I don't always know if I do believe everything happens for a reason. I don't know if I believe that. And I think just as a counter, maybe another, maybe
No,
a whole other
this is the
podcast.
dialogue that we need. I think this is good.
Right. Maybe a whole other is, I think, and I do think this is a very Jewish posture, is that that we are Jews are often in a lot more dialogue with the divine, right?
Correct.
Lots of questions, right? A lot of holidays have a lot of questions, blah blah. But I think, in my experience at least, I love that there are things that present themselves to us through both fate, accident, and divinity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I propose is that let's just say things don't happen for a reason.
Sure.
That to me offers the opportunity for the most divine act that humans have available to them, which is our gift of making meaning. That if something happens that's adverse, if something happens that's challenging or beautiful, it is our job as humans to go, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to frame this? What meaning will I make of it? What good will it do to moving forward? Or is it okay if I don't make meaning of this? Is this okay for this just to be a random thing and to find the divine peace in that? I think it's one of the ways I feel the divine power of human choice, the thou mayest of it all, the timshel of it all. I think that's how I view that, because it makes me feel responsible for how I respond to my life and to the actions that befall me and us. So I don't know. I discuss thoughts.
Maybe, and actually, I like that. I like that framing, because I guess the way I was defining it, in a way, puts limitations on the greatness of God, the Creator.
Yeah.
This is good. This is, you see, you're changing some viewpoints or putting it in a different light. So if you put limitations, or giving us the choice of free will, right?
Yes.
We have free will, and let me put this into words. How am I going to put this? Our decisions. Okay, so God, he says, I am, right?
Right.
I am. There's not a meaning or something defined. It just, I am, right? There's no, and also, time is a construct, beginning and end, right? We put meaning to it, but it's also, do you see, I'm trying to say that, just to sum it up, like what I already said, if we put constrictions on what is around us, well, okay, here's another thought. I will get a conclusion.
This is fun.
Here.
This is fun.
The wheels are finally turning in my head.
It's
right
good.
now.
It's good. Yeah.
Could me saying that everything happens for a reason is actually me having the own free will to give it meaning?
Okay. I love all this. So what I'm hearing now is actually that we as in all of us, but right now in this conversation, you and I, that we are currently a little bit at the mercy of the limitations of the English language and what has ostensibly become a catchphrase, right?
It is, right.
That when we have phrases that feel catchphrasy,
Yep.
we fail to interrogate them sometimes. And I think what we're doing is we're holding the phrase up
Mm-hmm.
as much as the concept. So what if instead of everything happens for a reason, we were to break it open and say, everything happens, period.
Yep.
The reasons come from a combination of our dialogue, our listening, our surrender, and our divine capacity to make meaning. Like,
Yes.
right? Like everything
Yes.
happens, and what the meaning is a combination of both muscular effort and humble submission to the listening of the unknown. Like,
I need to write this down.
I think that could be really good.
I like that. No, I
But do you know
think
what I mean?
I think
There's rigor there.
that's
Then.
the right lens to look at it, you know? Not
Right.
putting limitations, but with the tools that we are giving, this is how we observe and essentially navigate this life and the things that are thrown at us.
Right. I would never, for example, just to add to it, like I would never tell a child who'd lived through war or a trauma survivor. I would never offer everything happens for a reason. I
Oh
would
no,
never be so arrogant.
no, yeah.
But it is up to them what it means. And
Mm-hmm.
that is their human right. Will they make meaning of it, or will they move forward without? Is up to them. But I think in that action and in that choice after is where lives are made, right? And it doesn't have to always be positive. Like, I'm not saying everything has to have a positive spin too. I think that's also a little bit of some social pressure we have towards positivity bias, right? I just think that there's more of a really dynamic relationship between actions, accident, meaning, humble, surrender. I think it's more muscular. And I like the opportunity to feel muscular about existence. So
with serving the arts, and this is kind
this is
of,
fun.
yeah, this is, well, I think it's a healthy dialogue.
Yeah.
With you serving the art, or you serving through the arts, and then also having that relationship with the divine, how is this in your world today? How is this playing out? What is has it been more of a internal? Is it helping you more, or have you had outward positive reaction to this, or is it something that you don't really say to others? Do you, or you don't say this is what I'm doing, and you are receiving positive impact with this approach? Does that make sense?
So it's sort of, no, it makes sense. Look. Sorry, I hate when people say look.
You're okay.
Sorry, I said that. I think specifically with Judaism, we're living in a really tough moment where there's a lot of, that sentence, almost doesn't even capture it, right?
Correct.
And I think that one of the specificities about Judaism is, religion, culture, ethno-religion, a bunch of things that don't have clear parallels to other faiths that are inherited through family or elected midlife. There's all sorts of things that make the Jewish thing a little more complicated, especially politically in this moment.
Right.
I don't want, once again, I am not so arrogant to think that by reading 5 Instagram memes, I suddenly have a PhD in Middle Eastern history, for example. And I like to take the posture that I want to listen more than I talk when I am unfamiliar with certain things.
Sure.
But what I am certain of is that right now I feel that I'm living in a moment. I personally feel that I, just speaking for myself, am living in a moment when it is a little bit naive to simply share the joy of my faith without all of the other context swirling around it. And so I think I'm a little bit more selective about the manner in which I do it,
Mm,
and a little bit more private about, if you will, quote unquote, practicing it out loud.
yeah.
And maybe in the last 2 years have been, I think I would say, quieter on the internet in general, realizing that what once felt like a space for connection is now feeling quite warped, especially in the last like 5 years. And so renegotiating my relationship with that too, and the responsibility of a platform. Um, and so I think for me, yeah, it has changed, but the central quiet flame inside me has not changed. And I guess one of the great things about that is that if you still want to engage, I have sought out a lot more of connective experiences that exist IRL, in the real world. So it might not necessarily happen as publicly or as loudly online, um, but those experiences are still happening in private while I arrive at some new learning and renegotiations about how to be a Jew on earth in the year 2026, and which is much more complicated than it was even a few years ago.
Hmm.
And I say that with some sorrow and sadness. I've been disconnected with by a lot of people that I do think misunderstand,
Mm.
and that's been painful. But I also say it with a lot of hope because I've also equally heard from a lot of people I never thought I would connect with that have extended curiosity and allyship and connection, and done what I think we're doing, which is, grasping hands across something that could be a barrier, only to discover it's not.
Right.
And I'm choosing to focus there without being naive that the other stuff exists. But
Well, thank you for your
life
openness
is,
on this.
oh, thank you. Like
Yeah.
life is all, though, right? It's, we have to hold it all. We must hold it all. It's all, one of my favorite phrases, Rabbi Samantha Frank, it's all God.
Mm-hmm.
It's all God.
I love that.
And, another Catholic, Stephen Colbert, beautifully said, like, I'm grateful to be alive. And if I'm grateful to be alive, it means I have to be grateful for all of it.
Yeah, because
And
this is what we're experiencing, to experience
yeah,
it all. Isn't that powerful? I remember when you said that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just so vulnerable and right and human and true. And gratitude for it all is pretty Dean's List stuff. That's
Hmm.
Dean's List maturity. But acceptance is a interesting place to endeavor to begin.
Hmm.
So thank you so much for this opportunity to get into this. Like, what a rich conversation. And I admire you so much. I admire how you share both your art, your faith, your ideas, your um, discipline too with the world. And I admire you. So it's so nice to connect.
Well, it's mutual. It's
Thank
mutual.
you.
I do want to touch on what things are you exploring now? What creative outlets? What things are you excited
Ah,
about? New things that you're pursuing?
oh my gosh, so much.
The floor is yours.
Well, I'm very excited because I'm really about to endeavor on something quite new for me.
Mm.
That does feel kind of like a natural progression, though. I have been honored to have been asked to rewrite the libretto and script of the musical Brigadoon
Oh,
by that beautiful Alan J. Lerner and Frederick
yes.
Loewe, 1947 musical. The last Broadway revival was in 1980. It's been a really long time. And the book has some beautiful central themes. But there's a lot of things about it that, like a lot of musicals, have some creakiness, some outdated tropes and stuff, and not as fully connected to the Scottish culture as might be available to us in a slightly more global society.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've done a lot of updating, mostly in regards to the role women play in the piece, to authentic Scottish history, language, and music. We have an onstage Ceilidh band and some new orchestrations.
That's
And
fun.
I think I might be preaching to the appreciative choir when I tell you we're going to have a 27-piece orchestra.
Oh, that's
I know.
beautiful. Oh,
And it's making its world premiere in Los Angeles at the Pasadena Playhouse, the Tony Award-winning Pasadena Playhouse, in May of this year. So we're deep
soon.
in the
Ooh.
casting process and the whole thing. And I'm not going to be in it. I'm just right. Everyone always asks, they're like, "Are you in it?" No. I want to be able to serve,
Mm-hmm.
making sure this is the best version of this that it can possibly be. And for that, I need to remain on the outside. But it's so wonderful to bring so many chapters of my life together. The writing part, the singing actor part, which are two separate and connected skills, the love of musical theater as an art form, and my history and relationship to Scotland, which has remained in place since I graduated from the Royal Conservatoire. I've sat on their international advisory board pretty much since I graduated, and so I have a really ongoing relationship with them. And it's just been such a that is a job that really feels like service, to be able to participate in contributing to an ongoing legacy. Um, I feel like I'm just taking Alan J. Lerner's hand and going like, let's walk into the 21st
Mm-hmm.
century together, so that so many more people can be touched and moved by their ideas and their beautiful piece. So that's my big ah,
That's
news.
huge.
It's huge. I'm so excited about it. And then yeah, breaking news. After that, I leave. I go back to performing. I'm leaving right after we open to go back to Chicago, and I'm going to play Desiree Armfeldt in a Little Night Music.
Oh,
And so
wonderful.
a kind of a little bit potpourri of a year, but a rich year. And I'm also working on a lot of other new scripts that are, I think, a little too early in development to talk about, but a lot of writing, a lot of exciting ways that I hope I can keep contributing. And I think I still love acting. I love to sing. Some cool classical music things coming much later in the year. What I love to do is, when there's a project, I love to walk in the room and ask, how may I serve? Is
Mm.
it through my singing? Is it through my storytelling? Is it through my embodied acting? Um, I have nothing to prove and everything to share.
I love your perspective on all of this, and I'm so
Thank
excited for
you.
you with all these amazing projects lined
Thank
up. You're gonna just
you.
have a great time exploring all these different avenues and seeing how you can serve.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful. You're a beautiful human being, and I'm just so
Thank
blessed that
you.
you're sharing your time with me and the
It's so
listeners today.
mutual.
So thank
Yeah.
you so much. We are
Thank
coming,
you.
unfortunately, to the end of our podcast.
Yes.
And the way I close it out is we do a quick
Okay.
rapid fire round of questions.
Okay. I love a lightning round.
Okay, because some people
Okay.
are like, oh my gosh. Actually,
No, I love it.
we had some really deep questions, but these might be the hardest ones. So
Okay.
we'll see. Okay, I have my list. I have
Okay.
my timer. Are you
I'm
ready?
ready. I'm
Okay.
ready.
Here we go.
Okay.
Favorite role you've ever played?
Huddle.
Role that challenged you the most emotionally?
Julie Jordan.
Favorite theater in the world that you performed at?
Royal Albert Hall.
Favorite composer?
Richard Rogers.
Favorite musical of all time?
West Side Story.
Favorite city you have ever lived in?
Glasgow.
West End or Broadway, if you had to
Oh.
choose.
Ah! West End.
Favorite Jewish holiday?
Purim, which is coming up.
A book that changed your life?
East of Eden.
And what is a dream role you haven't played yet?
Lady Macbeth.
And what does a meaningful life look like to you?
A life filled with service and peace.
And that is our 1 minute. I love it. That was great. That was great. That was
so fun. It's so hard for me to not talk in paragraphs, but I did it.
Oh my gosh. You should see some of the other people I interview. They're like, I don't think they understand what rapid fire means. They're like, I say one question really quickly and they give like a 3-minute answer to a 1 minute rapid fire. So yeah, you did great. You were on top of it. That was awesome.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. And I certainly hope this isn't the last time we connect.
Oh, it most definitely will not be. So
great.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you too, of course.
Thanks for listening to the Sheckler Spotlight with your host, Harrison Sheckler. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the show with a friend. New conversations drop regularly, so stay tuned. And thanks again for listening and being a part of the journey. Follow Harrison Sheckler on social media and visit harrisonsheckler.com to learn more.